If you might remember, in 2010, Rolex released the first Submariner with ceramic bezel, reference 116610LN. What was interesting with that release was that while the Submariner kept the same size of 40mm, as was the original size in 1954, the ceramic sub always looked a bit bigger, substantial in size and muscular than the pre-ceramic subs that Rolex did. For the same reason, you hear its nickname given due to its muscular size as Maxi Case. So how did Rolex achieve this in the sub, that the size on paper remained the same, but the watch looked much bigger and substantial in its size on the wrist? The answer to this question probably relates to how Rolex intelligently and smartly develop and evolve their watches, where they stick with their core and iconic looks, yet offer a modern experience. Now if you relate the same with the new release Rolex Daytona and compare it with the last generation Daytona, or let's say the first generation Daytona with ceramic bezel, you can understand how seamlessly Rolex deliver what they want without moving too far away from their iconic looks, design and aesthetics. Comparing the all-new Daytona model 126500LN with the previous model reference 116500LN has some very interesting facts and differences to showcase. In this video, the watch in the black dial is the new reference and the panda dial is the outgoing reference 1165. Looking closely at the dials, the easiest giveaway is the hour indices, which are longer and thinner in the new reference. The hour and minute hands appear to be similar, but the center seconds hand is wider and a bit more obvious or easy to read in the new reference on the left. The text for Daytona and also Rolex and all the letters appear to be in bold and more prominent in the new reference. The minute graduations on the dial periphery are also bolder in the new reference. The bezel looks narrower in the new reference, but that's because it has a steel rim on the outer side. So the overall width is similar if you add the thickness of the steel rim to bezel width on the new reference. The bezel graduations look identical, so is the case with the font size of the graduations in both of these references. The case in the new reference comes with symmetrical lugs on both the left and right side, which for me personally is the biggest upgrade. What do I mean by this is what I explained in my earlier video where I reviewed the Panda Daytona model 116500LN. You can also notice in this clip how the lugs on the left side of the case on the older reference look thinner than the lugs on the non-crown side. As you can notice in this clip, the lug height is taller in the new reference too. That is, it comes with 47.6 mils of lug to lug versus the older reference that comes with a lug height of 46.4 mils. So there's a difference of about 1.2 mils in the lug to lug height. To complement the bigger size and with purpose to increase the heftiness, you can notice how the crown guards on the new reference are much wider than the crown guards on the older reference that look quite slender next to the ones on the new reference. I stated in my review of the new reference Daytona that it initially looked thicker than the previous reference, but I went with what I read. That is, the new model is thinner and I assumed it to be correct. Guess what? It wasn't. The new reference, as it originally seemed thicker, is actually thicker than the older reference, but only marginally. On my caliber, the case thickness of the old reference comes at 12.18 mils as opposed to the new reference, which comes at 12.26 mils, so only about 0.1 mils thicker. That is about negligible. The size measured at the outer extremity of the bezel on both of these models remains the same, but interestingly, the size measured for the crystal, or let's say for the dial, is different. That is 30.35 mils on the older reference and 29.7 mils on the new reference. So you could say that the face of the watch or the dial of the watch on the new reference is smaller than the older reference. As I mentioned earlier, that the lug-to-lug on the new model is a bit taller than the older reference. What's interesting is that if you measure the dimension from the center end link to end link, it is 50.8 mils on the older reference, yet 49.4 mils for the new reference. That is, while the new model will look and appear bigger on your wrist due to its taller lug-to-lug when it comes to wearing and wrist ability, the new model will wear about 1 millimeter easier and smaller. Talk about intelligent design and execution, and Rolex really do very well what they are good at. The all-new model Rolex Daytona is indeed a modern and futuristic watch, but what Rolex do really well is that they gradually evolve their watches so that every new model, although looks identical and similar to the outgoing model, there are minor differences and tweaks that make the outgoing model a collectible as something that will never be produced again. And this is exactly where the value retention and collectability of Rolex comes from. And then speaking about the watch that replaces this outgoing reference, it is always futuristic, future-proof, technologically an improved version, and yet aesthetically a timeless timepiece. So regardless of whether you have the older reference or the new, of basically any model, with Rolex on the wrist, you are winning it.